to cocktail number 2. And so we are completely switching from biblical times to 1800s, I think. I shouldn't have asked you just as you took a drink.
1699 to 1725 or so.
Oh, this is way earlier than I thought. But just to put in a plug for a previous guest here, my friend Oscar Shaheen was on the program probably about 3.5 years ago. He was one of the earlier guests of the podcast. And his books are all about, I hate to say Pirates of the Caribbean because, people think of the movie, but his books are really, really neat. And if you like pirate stories, I believe you are only the second author that we've had on who writes about pirates. So, yeah, I'll have to get a few more to...
I don't want to keep you from drinking.
Well, I sincerely appreciate that. So what we have, looking at South Carolina and the Low Country and the, almost tropical humidity and heat, when I've ever visited South Carolina, it's about a couple of things. Some very good, easy to drink drinks, sweet tea, and, just good culture, good conversation, good experiences. So I had to go to a very straightforward South Carolinian drink, which is sweet tea and vodka. And so here we have basically about 4 ounces of sweet tea to a jiggerful of vodka, which I'll just shake up here and very simply and easily serve over ice. And I know we're talking that we're in the 17th century, and so, we're not necessarily perhaps in the Gullah Gullah time frame or, in the traditional Low Country. But to me, as I was reading that story of Anne and her grandmother, this just called out to me as the drink that should be sipped while, reading a story like that.
So tonight has been an absolute night full of technical and other kinds of difficulties. So story of my life. Life is what happens when you're making other plans, right? The dog is whining up a storm and acting like we're about to be raided by, I don't know, pirates or something.
Carthaginians or something.
Right. Something like that. So, cheers, sweet tea and vodka.
Mm-hmm.
I can't even taste the vodka in that.
Which is important, I think, for a very good drink.
And for young men at frat parties. So I have to say, first of all, to me, now I grew up in the Air Force, so I've kind of lived all around, but, my parents' families have been in the Midwest since they got to this country in the 1800s. So, I'm not really a product of the South, and I didn't really think of Tennessee as the South, but apparently it is the South and the Deep South. So here we have, I discovered sweet tea. I'd always heard about sweet tea. Up in the North, we don't have it, and so I imagine it as being like kind of iced tea, but with like that much sugar mixed into it, like you would just choke. I didn't think I would like it, but when we got here, I got sick of drinking water and I was just in bed all day recuperating. And Chris brought me iced tea, and I have been drinking this stuff by the gallon. I swear there are times I go through an entire jug in a day, and it's like, Chris, I'm out of
anyway, it's time to go get more. I have to say, when I've been to South Carolina, I worked with some companies in Columbia and other spots that are not far from the Low Country, that some of that sweet tea actually was the consistency of like maple syrup. There was so much sugar in it, but it just depends upon where you go.
Milo's that you have is from Alabama.
Okay.
Actually. And sweet tea is always the joke of the South, because that's really is sort of the standard drink.
Mm-hmm.
And if you go anywhere in the country and ask for iced tea or sweet tea, or sweet iced tea, they many times have no idea what you're talking about. So
Oh,
you're right.
we wouldn't have in Duluth. I mean, I'd heard of sweet tea, but really only because, like I interview authors from all over the country and I do a lot of reading. But even I would have been like, what is that tea with like 5,000, cups of sugar in it?
Right,
I don't know.
In the North, of course, if you ask for sweet tea, they'd look at you disapprovingly because you would want sugar in your drink. And then second of all, they would feed you or give you a very inadequately brewed cup of tea, and you'd be, it's nothing like you get down south, is what I very, very much have seen.
You give you a cup of hot tea and a glass of ice.
Right.
Once you mix it that way, it's not very good at all.
Right, yeah, it's
Well,
terrible.
I'm a total convert. Plus, we're loving the fact that we are not going to be dealing with shoveling 15 feet of snow this winter. It's been 40 years in publishing, marketing. What did your work in publishing involve? What was your part of publishing?
I was editorial vice president of a trade magazine company. And so I was the editor of one magazine and had 3 other magazines' editorial product answer to me.
Okay. How did your work in publishing help you with your own writing and publishing?
I don't think it did. I think it let me understand more about what the publisher goes through to get a book done.
Mm-hmm.
Because I had to go through it every month with the magazine that I edited and saw to it to the others as well.
Yeah. And I think that's important.
Yeah, it just gives me a different view of things than a typical writer.
Yeah, I in addition to writing my books, I do have a small publishing company, and we'll leave it at saying I had an interesting experience with someone who really didn't understand what the publisher does, and that didn't work out so well. So after a lifetime in marketing, which you also did marketing, what is some of your best advice for authors on marketing their books?
I wish I had some good, because that would mean that I had some success. I tell you, if you don't have an agent that's a good agent, then you are responsible for virtually everything.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And the success I've had, which is not great, has been in person, one-to-one, selling books and going to signings, and I wish I could say that I was on my way to making $1 million, but
Me too.
I'm on my way to making 1,000.
It's important to start small.
That was a great sales pitch. See, normally I ask authors to please send me a copy of their book just because I feel that it helps me give a much better interview when I know the whole story. I didn't ask you just because, as I've said, the last 3 months have been helping doctors put their children through college, as I have one surgery after another and recuperate, and still not quite through that. We made a cross-country move in the middle of all of that, and it was just like, okay, something has to give, so otherwise I would have asked you and I would have read the whole book, but now I'll buy it instead. So you're up to 1,001.
That I'll be able to say thank you.
It's important to plead poverty every now and then.
Right.
It can help.
I will say, I don't like my advice because I wish I had better advice. But when my books were selling really, really well, and it was a perfect time, I needed them to sell well. Won't go into details of that time in my life, but I was working 18 hours a day. I was getting up at 6 a.m., doing a little writing, getting the kids off to school, did a little more writing, went and taught music lessons, which was kind of the bread and butter, got home, got dinner made for the kids, maybe did a little cleaning up, got the kids to bed, and I wrote until 1 a.m. And when I say wrote, I mean writing and marketing, and I would go down rabbit holes of, these people are doing interviews, these people have blogs, these people. So, and it worked. It worked. But I'm telling you, if you want success, you need to be willing to work 18 hours a day. And eventually I burned out. And I keep asking this question, hoping there's a better answer. So thanks for disappointing me. I'll buy your book anyway.
I can't. I thought that at least, first of all, that I would sell a lot to my friends.
Right.
Okay. So that was my first error.
I hope all your friends are listening and feel guilty.
That's right.
I
Shame.
told some of them. So that's it. But it's just, my daddy ends so far have been the libraries. Why wouldn't somebody in a library in the state of South Carolina not want to have the Ann Bonny book on the shelf? And
It's
it is.
right. We need to go on to cocktail number 3. And just for all our, oh my gosh, there's an absolutely incredible rainbow out there.
Oh, wow, there is.
It's a double rainbow, in fact. That's amazing. I'll have to try and take a picture. It's not behind us, it's to our side where the camera's not picking it up. It's also starting to drizzle here, so, we may need to hit pause and run inside. But, so cocktail number 3.
Well, you actually introduced it
did.
as we were bringing in cocktail number 2. I will give you a grog, a rum and grog for this reading.
And I love the history behind this.
Yes.
I didn't know it.
As we know, grog, of course, before was a drink, he was an admiral. And one of the things that he brought to the table was, British sailors received a ration of rum as they were, every day as they were on the seas. And as the barrels of rum would get a little short as time would go on, they would water it down a bit, perhaps mix it with a bit of sugar. But then, of course, they learned to mix in some lime juice in order to prevent scurvy. And, an ounce of lime juice has, about a full day's worth of vitamin C. Awesome. And so I had to make a rum and grog for today, starting off with an ounce of lime juice, an ounce of brown sugar to give it a little bit of sweetness, some dark rum, and water, of course, to be reminiscent of the watered down rum, and so I have that here in a shaker.
You should hold that in front of the camera and shake.
It's in the shaker, and then I'll just pour it over some ice, and we will have our rum and grog for the 3rd reading.
So, cheers. This is reminiscent of what the pirates might have been drinking on board, maybe a slightly updated version with brown sugar.
What do you think?
Oh my gosh, sign me up to be a pirate if I get this every day.
Or a British sailor.
I don't care. This is good.
Mm-hmm.
This is good. Of course, I'm a huge fan of brown sugar, so. What did I say? 7.9 million audience members, and that's based on intense research drawn mainly from my imagination, which is completely valid.
I think it was up to 8.3 million earlier today.
8.3?
Yes.
What, are you telling me Ralph lost to some listeners? Wow.
You said 7 point something.
I said
You
something.
have to deal with it.
Okay, so maybe we're up to maybe we were at 7.9 and he got us up to 8.2. There's a fascinating theme. One of your books, Ill-Gotten Gains, touches on this man who comes across 30 pieces of silver. And I thought this is an interesting theme. I haven't seen a whole lot of books on this theme, but there's The Robe, which is about the soldier who wins Christ's robe. There is, let me see my notes, The Fourth Wise Man, which is about, it's a movie. I don't think it was a book, but I could be wrong. And it's about, there was supposed to be a fourth wise man. Yeah, okay, supposed to be. There was supposed to be,
speaking.
right. There was supposed to be a fourth wise man, and he didn't quite get there on time. And so he's constantly trying to catch up. And he has these 3 jewels, and it's about how he spends his life seeking Christ and losing one jewel after another to try and help other people. But it's about how he peripherally touches the life of Christ. There was a book called The Man Who Built the Cross, and it's about the man who built the cross that Christ dies on. And so I think that there is, kind of a theme of people whose lives touch these artifacts of Christ. Why do you think that we're drawn to stories like that?
Ill-Gotten Gain was book number one. I had that question as a teenager. What happened to the 30 pieces of silver? They were obviously an important talisman, and yet they just disappeared. So that was the basis of it took 40 years to write it, but it was 20 more years of the question, and where did they go?
Mm-hmm.
The relationship between Jesus and Judas was from the later part of my teen years. What happened? Why? We have a statement about how evil this guy was, and yet he had the money. He was the most trusted of the disciples. So I think that we're taught so heavily in church that you don't question, because I was told that I should just quit asking questions. And I was, even as a young man, always had questions.
Right.
That's one thing I can thank my parents for, is I was encouraged to question.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's the biggest problem, is that there's no answer to most of the questions that you have as a church-going Christian person.
Mm-hmm.
And I really never liked the idea of just take it on faith.
Right.
I mean, that's okay. And there's faith in everything that's religious, but I still had the question. And when I went to find the answer myself, many times I found more questions than I found answers.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what started the whole